SpongeGex here. Previously, I did a review of Shadow Generations, part of the bundle game Sonic X Shadow Generations. So now I'm going to do a review of the original Sonic Generations featured in this game. I've never really done a review of this game before, though I did do a commentary playthrough of the original PC port, but it was more of me revisiting the game. I was just only focusing on revisiting the Act 1 and 2 levels of Sonic and Classic Sonic. I didn't bother going through the story or the mission mode, so I'm not sure what fans are going to name this new version of the game, since there are a few differences from the original. You gotta give it some kind of name to distinguish the two, kind of like how people called Sonic the Hedgehog in 2006, they call it Sonic 06 to not confuse it with the first game that has the exact same name. So I wouldn't call this a remaster, though, for nothing was really remade, just a few alterations of cutscenes and dialogue, and they hid some chow in levels that do absolutely nothing upon collecting, so you can't really call it Sonic Generations HD, you can't call it a remake, you can't call it a remaster, so Sonic Generations 2024 maybe, I don't know, but while I wouldn't call Sonic Generations the best 3D Sonic game like others have, I still found it to be a decent game back then, but I wasn't the biggest fan of the Unleashed hybrid style of gameplay. I prefer pure 3D platforming, so I groaned every time a 3D level swerved into that 2D perspective and control scheme. I always preferred Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, and I wish they would go back to making games with similar controls and objectives. Closest we've gotten was Sonic Frontiers and its free DLC update. I mean, it was neat to be able to play as more characters like Tails, Amy, and Knuckles again. I just wish they had slightly better gameplay and controls that actually reflect the gameplay of Sonic Adventure, not stiff controls with tiring, overwhelming combat. So ever since Sonic Unleashed, I got tired of Sonic being the only playable character. I missed the spin dash from Sonic Adventure, I missed the physics and momentum of the older 3D games, and I got tired of relying on that dang boosting gameplay through narrow pathways, and that's another thing I miss. I miss levels actually being more open. I hate how it just feels like almost every boost level is just narrow hallways, platforming, and I don't know, I got tired of it. So that being said, I found Sonic Generations to be the best out of these boost games. There was more to offer compared to previous and later entries in the Boost series. Now, to clarify, I kind of badly worded things in my Shadow Generations review. I said it was the best out of the Boost 3D Sonic games, and actually, I honestly do prefer Sonic Generations. Shadow's the best one in a long time, I'll at least say that, but when comparing to Sonic Generations, I think Generations has more to offer. Shadow Generations does have a lot of good qualities to it, though. It is a really good spiritual successor to it. So the game's novelty was exciting, taking one level from each past main Sonic game, minus Sonic CD for some reason, and they remake them into HD 3D levels with two versions of each level, one that plays like the modern Unleashed style, and one that plays like the classic Genesis gameplay. I honestly would have liked it better if modern Sonic's levels were pure 3D and played more like the Sonic Adventure gameplay. Apparently there was original plans to have 3 Sonics in the game, one to represent Classic, one to represent Adventure, and one to represent Boost, but I guess they decided that the Boost Sonic was too similar. I mean, it's the exact same character from Adventure, so yeah, I kind of see why they cut it out, but it's still a shame, though. It would have been cool to have Adventure gameplay implemented. Sorry about that, that was my ringtone. So, speaking of 2 Sonics, that was the big reveal during the game's original announcement. The game involves Sonic meeting his past self, reusing the original design of the Sega Genesis era. So this game involves Sonic getting a surprise birthday party from all of his friends, except Shadow, Silver, Big, and Omega weren't invited for some reason. Although Shadow Dark Beginnings and Shadow Generations actually retconned this to where Shadow was invited in the first place, but he just couldn't make it. So too bad Silver only had one main game. It would have been neat for Silver to get a Silver Generations, but one level from Sonic 06 would feel like a ripoff, so yeah, it's kind of understandable. So suddenly, a time-controlling monster called the Time Eater crashes the party and kidnaps Sonic's friends, trapping them in worlds from the past, and turning the world into a motionless white void. The only thing that can restore it is the speed of the 2 Sonics, as they seem to run through the worlds and it brings color and time back to them. Honestly, that feels like a wasted opportunity. Imagine if that actually reflected the gameplay during the first time you play these levels. What if the level did start off as blank slates, but as the Sonics run through them, color starts reviving around them? That likely would have been too ambitious at the time, and maybe too ambitious to this very day. The game requires us to complete each level 2 times, one as Modern and Classic Sonic separately. The game is split into 3 main chapters and a final battle. So each chapter takes 3 worlds from a generation of Sonic's past. These levels were claimed to be picked by fans as their favorite levels from each Sonic game. I honestly find some of these hard to believe. I mean, really? Chemical Plant Zone? Planet Wisp? Surely there are better stages than that they could have picked. The first chapter is themed after the Genesis era of Sonic, with level 1 being Green Hill Zone from Sonic 1, level 2 as Chemical Plant Zone from Sonic 2, and Sky Sanctuary from Sonic and Knuckles. Chapter 2 contains levels from the Dreamcast era of Sonic, and for some reason it has a Sonic Heroes level thrown in there. These include Speed Highway from Sonic Adventure, City Escape from Sonic Adventure 2, and Seaside Hill from Sonic Heroes. Chapter 3 includes what was at the time the modern era of Sonic, including Crisis City from Sonic 06, Rooftop Run from Sonic Unleashed, and finally Planet Wisp from Sonic Colors. While there are some great levels in there, with some being really well made, I do feel very mixed about the level variety. Too many of the levels just kind of blend in. It's kind of like how Super Smash Bros. Ultimate has too many levels that just are way too visually similar, and it kind of makes you wish they had more variety, like a snow level, a Bowser's Castle level, you know. A lot of great ideas that would have made great stages. Instead, they just want a clone of Green Hill Zone, a clone of Pokemon Stadium, a clone of every Mario level. It's just kind of generic. So, for instance, we got 2 levels that resemble Green Hill Zone, with, of course, Green Hill and Seaside Hill. We got 2 industrialized levels in Chemical Plant and Planet Wisp, and we got way too many city-themed levels in a row, including Speed Highway, City Escape, Crisis City, and Rooftop Run. While the levels are too thematically similar, there are still differences between some of them. For instance, like Crisis City serves as the game's fire level, Seaside Hill serves as the game's water level. So I'll share my thoughts on each level with each act and which ones I preferred, and whether I think these remade levels are actually better than the ones from their original games. So first is Green Hill Zone Act 1. So the Act 1 stages are classic Sonic stages. So Green Hill is mostly a faithful 3D HD recreation of the very first thing players saw and played when first playing Sonic 1. I honestly enjoy playing this level alone more than the entirety of Sonic 1 combined. Not only are the visuals gorgeous, but classic Sonic's controls are overall pretty good. My favorite addition is the instant spin dash, where you just hold R2 for Sonic to rev up his spin automatically. In the original Sonic Generations, the auto spin was activated with the square button, but they changed it for the remaster for some reason, the 2024 version. So the square button is now a clone of the jump button, so that took some getting used to, because I was used to the original control scheme on PS3. So Auto Spin Dash was such a great feature, and I'm sad that this is the only game with Classic Sonic to use it. I always hated having to hold down and charge the jump button for Sonic to use this ability. It especially got annoying if you tried using it on a slope, and then you remember, oh yeah, if you hold down on a slope, it causes Sonic to roll automatically. So I love the Spin Dash, the Auto Spin Dash. It is such a great feature. Just holding one simple button was a faster and easier way to pull it off. Yet Sonic Forces got rid of it, and it wasn't implemented into either Sonic Mania or Sonic Origins, and I really wish it was there. While I'm on that topic, I forgot to mention how one of the only gameplay differences in this version of Sonic Generations is that it includes the drop dash from Sonic Mania, and that's about it. I honestly wish that this re-release was, in fact, a remake, because while I still think a lot of the visuals hold up, I still think there are a few little things that haven't aged very well. Like, they bothered me back then, even on the PS3 and PC version, but like, for one thing, a lot of the colors in this game are way too bright. It's especially noticeable during, like, the opening and ending cutscene where the characters are, picnicking around, like, a field area, and you just notice how the grass looks way too bright green, and there's, like, a really weird bloom effect where whenever they're in a grassy area, you notice, like, a green tint around the characters, and it just looks so off. It looks like someone took a Gary's Mod screenshot or something. Like how if you're in a grassy level in Gary's Mod, it causes a really weird green tint. I mean, you look at real life. When people are in a grassy field, they do not have like a green glow around them. It's so weird. And so I honestly wish this was a remake so they could have fixed that issue. But, So Green Hill is reimagined with lush grass, shimmering water, detailed stone and dirt textures, the iconic loops and corkscrews, the spike traps, and it still has all the colorful animal-themed badniks like motobugs, crab meat, and buzz bombers. It's a great introduction to the game and a great welcome back to classic Sonic's roots. Now, Act 2 isn't the first time that Green Hill Zone was reimagined as a 3D platforming level, for it was a real hard-to-unlock bonus in Sonic Adventure 2, but Generations did mark the first time we saw Green Hill Zone in an HD version. So it's basically just a typical Sonic Unleashed level, but in Green Hill. A lot of boosting, 4 side-scrolling flips, grind sections. So despite being more of the same from past games, it was still visually fun and had some great segments, like the chase with the giant Chomper Fish Badnik. While I do prefer the 3D gameplay over the side-scrolling gameplay, I'd have to say I actually prefer Classic Sonic's version of this level. And overall, I think both Sonic Generations' version of Green Hill Zone are better than the original from Sonic 1. I'd rather replay these levels on repeat than play Sonic 1 ever again. So on to Chemical Plant Act 1. Considering how Chemical Plant Zone was my most hated level in that game, aside from Metropolis Zone, I actually really like the level in Sonic Generations. It's less brutal this time around. You've still got the same aesthetic and catchy music, the same threats like the spider badniks, the blue chemicals that shoot out, rotating platforms. You got a lot of the same imagery, like the blue and yellow overlapping slopes, and the dreaded purple liquid that can drown you. Luckily, there's a lot less of it this time around, so you're less likely to drown. They also got rid of those pesky flipping panels that were hard to time right, which likely killed players in very cheap ways. So you're also less likely to get crushed by the rotating blocks as well. I think if you get squished in this game, you just lose rings instead of getting automatically KO'd. So it's a great redemption for a level that most young gamers couldn't get past. As for Act 2, more boosting and grinding, but it has the addition of drifting, zip lines, a water slide, and a skydiving segment. I actually enjoyed Act 2 more than Act 1. So like I said before, the Generations version of Chemical Plant beats Sonic 2's version in both acts. Even the Sonic Mania version of this level beats the original. Although I would have preferred if they remade a level like Aquatic Ruin Zone or Sky Chase Zone. I mean, Chemical Plant Zone isn't exactly the first choice when I think of best Sonic 2 level. That's one of my most dreaded levels in the game, actually. So for Act 1 of Sky Sanctuary, we get a gorgeous recreation of the fluffy cloud platforms, the crumbling, spiraling towers, the pesky egg robos, the elevating bars that we have to hang onto and jump off of, the rideable spinning discs that we have to run or spin on to activate, and the red spheres that warp us high into the sky. It's overall a fun fairy tale-like level where we explore collapsing ruins in the sky. Act 2 has more of the same, but of course, 3D gameplay, but it excludes the spinning discs and the hanging bars. We do get a neat section where we drift down a dark spiraling tower from the inside. Overall, I liked Act 2 better and consider these levels better than the ones from Sonic 3. Speed Highway Act 1 is the first level in the game I didn't care for. There are some cool camera angles, and it features a lot of the same obstacles, objects, and enemies from the original, like the monkey badniks driving the cop cars. We got the helicopter, the rideable missile, and the moving cars we got to avoid. It even has the giant bell where jumping at it makes rings pop out. It's otherwise a level with way too many pitfalls and slow, narrow moving platforms. Act 2 was an improvement, reflecting more of the original game it's based on. We got the swerving and winding streets, we even got the iconic scene of Sonic running down the skyscraper, but this time with the inclusion of the cop cars chasing him. The only downside is that this does not include the second half of the original level, where after Sonic reached the bottom of the skyscraper, daylight appears as we enter a more open and explorable part of the city, as we dodge cars and run and hop across rooftops. I really wish they remade that part as well. The level also reintroduces the light speed dash, which is sadly underutilized in this game and barely used in this level. On the bright side, it's based on the instant charge one from Sonic Adventure 2, and it doesn't share the same button as an ability that can plunge Sonic to his death. I think Sonic Unleashed was the first game to give the light speed dash its own button, instead of it having to stupidly share the same button as the bounce or stomp ability, which makes Sonic 06 the last game to use that faulty button placement. So far, this is the first level in the game where I prefer the original over the remade version. The looser controls, more explorable sections, and even better music just makes the original more fun to play. I honestly would have preferred Emerald Coast or Twinkle Park being remade instead. I mean, Speed Highway was a decent level in the original game, but I wouldn't call it the best. Act 1 of City Escape is a fun reimagining of the iconic first level from Sonic Adventure 2. Unlike the original game where we get chased by a military truck at the very end, this level has a more hellbent truck chasing us throughout the level as it rams through buildings, enemies, and platforms. It's actually really tricky to dodge, especially during the platforming sections, since it moves ridiculously fast and doesn't give players enough time to respond. We also get a never-before-seen power-up that only Classic Sonic can use, which is a skateboard. It just allows Sonic to automatically move forward at a faster pace, and it allows him to jump high off of ramps if we time the jump button just right. We also get a catchy remix of the level's original iconic tune. Not as good as the level from Sonic Adventure 2 itself, but a fun side-scrolling reimagining. As for modern Sonic's recreation, it's mostly a very faithful recreation, but with even wider and more open areas to run around in. They got the original singer to do a different cover of the level's theme, and I honestly like it better than the original song. It still opens up with Sonic surfing down the streets, ramming cars, and pulling off tricks. We still got the gun robots trying to hunt us down. We got all the rails to grind on, except now the grinding is faster and automatic, unlike the original where you have to steer in a certain direction, and the steering always felt off in that game. We still got the poles that Sonic can swing and jump off of for a boost. One of the biggest differences, of course, is that it has a side-scrolling section forced midway through the level, but it was one of the more tolerable side-scrolling sections in modern Sonic's gameplay. The level mostly focuses on 3D platforming, and then, of course, there's the iconic truck chase at the end, and it's really amped up. Not only can Sonic boost during this chase, but the truck now has 3 oversized buzzsaws that we need to sidestep to dodge. And right at the end, Sonic runs alongside the buildings as the truck manages to do the same. It's like driving on the side of the buildings. It's just hellbent on trying to catch us this time. And so people who first played this game got really good laughs and shocked reactions from this. They took the craziest part of this fan favorite level and made it even crazier. Not to mention, you can unlock Super Sonic upon beating this game, which makes this part even more insane if you go super during the chase. Now, the only downside though is that this, aside from the buzzsaws, this part of the game is way too easy, because there was a point where I wasn't even boosting. I was just running forward, and I even let go of the control stick, and Sonic was automatically running, and no matter what, he always stays ahead of the truck. So it's impossible to get rammed by the truck in this version, unlike the original game, where you were forced to keep running or rolling to stay ahead. In this one, the only thing you gotta worry about is the buzzsaws. Now, when I first played Sonic Generations about over a decade ago, I honestly preferred the original Sonic Adventure 2 version of this level. But after spending more time going back and forth between both games, I honestly do prefer the Generations version now. So, on to Act 1 of Seaside Hill Zone from Sonic Heroes. It's the closest you'll get to a water level in the game. The classic version is very similar to levels like Labyrinth Zone or even Hydro City Zone. It contains a lot of underwater temple sections. Despite being called Seaside Hill Zone, it's more of a mixture of that and the second act level Ocean Palace Zone. It still features a lot of the similar Green Hill visuals, like the grass, the checker-patterned hills, the palm trees, the seawater. But now there's a lot more of a beach theme and a temple theme to it. You got the egg pond enemies, including the ones with the blasters and a lance. You still got the stone wheels that chase you. There's even a nod to Hydro City Zone from Sonic 3, as there's an underwater section where a current pushes you through swerving tunnels, and you gotta hang on to poles and let go at the right time to dodge obstacles and move forward. It's an alright level, but not that great. Act 2 is a lot better. It introduces wall jumping segments, and they kind of resemble the triangle jump segments from Sonic Heroes, while mixing it with the wall jumping that was introduced in Sonic Unleashed. It has more iconic nods to Sonic Heroes, like needing to bash through temple walls, except now Sonic can just boost through them without needing Knuckles to punch through them. You got the boost and rainbow rings that fling us through the air. We even got a section where we can either hop across the backs of the giant turtles from Ocean Palace Zone, and we can even ride a race car, which seems to be a stand-in for the kart section in Sonic Heroes, where Sonic and Knuckles spun to act as wheels, while Tails would fly to jump the cart off the ground. And it wraps up with the giant stones chasing us. So they even have the orcas paying tribute to Sonic Adventure's Emerald Coast, except this time the orca isn't trying to kill us. It is fun to play through a Sonic Heroes level with just one character, but it kind of defeats the purpose of Sonic Heroes. Sonic was only able to get through that level because of the help of Tails and Knuckles. So this level kind of feels like a middle finger to Tails and Knuckles, as if they were useless all along, and that just doesn't sit right with me. I prefer Sonic relying on teamwork with his friends instead of him getting everything done. I like his friends actually having a role instead of just being cheerleaders, like this game made them. So it's still an okay level, but I prefer playing these levels with the team mechanics from Heroes. Act 1 of Crisis City is a tough and exhausting level with many narrow platforms, too much fire and lava, and Iblis's annoying minions spawning out of nowhere with really cheap attacks. So just when you think the level is about over, you see the goalpost, you run towards it, only for the pesky flaming tornado from the original Sonic 06 level. It trolls the players by sucking up a chunk of the building with the goalpost on it as it flies away, forcing us to jump through bursts of wind and floating debris and cars to reach the goalpost. The ending twist is both annoying but hilarious at the same time, especially for players who have haunting flashbacks of constantly dying from the tornado section in Sonic 06. It's one of the game's first challenging levels. It's not entirely bad, but it has very annoying sections. The remixed music is great, though. As for Act 2, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually prefer this level as it was in Sonic 06. That is, if you ignore the long-ass loading screens. I honestly prefer the Project 06 version of this level even greater, but Modern Sonic's version of Crisis City is disappointing and somehow even more frustrating. Sonic 06 may not have been a good functioning game, but it still had a lot of cool ideas and set pieces. This remade level cuts out the opening snowboarding section down the burning skyscrapers and roads. It's lacking the destruction physics that made Sonic 06 such a unique game compared to later Sonic games. Seriously, ever since Sonic Unleashed, the destruction physics in Sonic games have been cheap or lame or missing entirely. I miss smashing the boxes and robots and seeing their pieces scatter and linger across the levels a bit. I really wish they'd bring that back, especially with how much frame rates have improved in video games nowadays. I wish they would try that again. Admittedly, it did slow the game down drastically in Sonic 06, but I feel like nowadays more powerful hardware could handle these moments. I thought the music from the original level was even better. I feel like the remade version of the modern theme sounds like a huge downgrade. I'll at least say the Flaming Tornado section is a lot easier this time around. It's also shorter. It's no longer an auto runner with terrible platforming. It's now treated more as a sidestepping boost section. The biggest annoyance in this level, though, is the lengthy side-scrolling section forced midway through the level, and it entirely puts this level to a halt. I might have actually enjoyed this level if it was purely 3D, but that side-scrolling section with the annoying enemies and platforms that we gotta stomp on, it really drags this level down. I still prefer Act 2 over Act 1, but I can't believe I'm saying that. Sonic 06 did this level better. Rooftop Run Act 1 is a very annoying level. Worst classic Sonic level in the game. I honestly didn't think Spagonia was that great of a level in Sonic Unleashed. I honestly preferred Savannah Citadel and Dragon Road a lot better. Spagonia was always overrated to me. I never found the music catchy or memorable like others have. I admittedly like the music from the nighttime version of the stage. Admittedly, the scene with Sonic grinding and spiraling over and downward towards the city, it was really neat, but it didn't amaze me as much as other levels in the game. I hated the pesky QuickTime events that this level had as well, so somehow this level is even worse as a classic Sonic level. They added a bit of the nighttime version in this version by having Sonic go through a wine cellar with giant barrels that chase after him, but the worst part of this level is the giant clock tower. As if scaling up it wasn't annoying enough, once you get to the actual clock itself, you gotta jump and hang on to the clock's hands, avoid spike balls and enemy projectiles as you try reaching the center of the clock so you can spin in the middle of it until the clock explodes and opens a path to go forward. I'm beginning to realize that once the game reaches Chapter 3, that's where we get the worst levels Sonic Generations has to offer. So I may not care much for Rooftop Run in Sonic Unleashed, but this mess of a side-scrolling level makes me appreciate the original even better. As for Act 2, I'll admit I actually enjoy playing through this version more than the Unleashed version. The only downside is that I find it visually less impressive. I mean, they tried sprucing it up by adding all these colorful hot air balloons. Otherwise, I thought Unleashed had better destruction physics, better lighting and shading. Gameplay-wise, Generations version is a huge improvement, with better controls and replacing the pesky QuickTime sections and replacing them with trick sections instead. So, layout-wise, it's the most faithful recreation of any past Sonic level in this game. I mean, it's not that shocking, because Sonic Generations only came out a few years later after Sonic Unleashed, so there wasn't much they needed to do to improve on the level. It's nearly a shot-for-shot recreation of the level. I wouldn't even be surprised if they just, instead of remaking it, I'll bet they just recycled the level and gave it different textures and all. So, while Act 1 is inferior to the level from Sonic Unleashed, I'll say modern Sonic's version of the level is better gameplay-wise. And finally, Act 2 for Planet Wisp, one of the worst levels in the game. I was never a big fan of colors to begin with, and I always found the Planet Wisp one of the lesser levels in the game. It's just a boring, oversized construction site that relies way too much on side-scrolling and overused Wisp power-ups. So now we got a version that's nothing but the side-scrolling, and it drags on even longer. It is surprising that they bothered having the Pink Spike Wisp show up in this game, making this the only time that this power-up is used in the game. I'll at least say the Spike power-up was one of the lesser annoying Wisps in the game, but the gimmick gets old really fast. Just keep clinging on the walls, ceilings, and gears, and use the spin dash over and over, while avoiding annoying egg pawns that throw pickaxes at us. This level just sucks. Both remixes for the Planet Wisp theme, it just sounds worse than the original as well. As for Act 2, this is honestly the worst modern Sonic level in the game, and it's really a shame because I thought I was going to like the level at first. One thing I loved about Sonic Colors was how bright and colorful the plant life on Planet Wisp was, as seen during the game's opening sequence. But of course, since the game involves Eggman taking over their planet, that means that most of the gameplay was nothing but the nature being destroyed as we do nothing but climb up these tall construction sites, and it got old and boring really fast. So this reimagining of the level, it really teases us by letting Sonic run around an even bigger, more open 3D version of the nature side. It was gorgeous, and I thought, oh wow, this looks even better than it did in Sonic Colors. I think I might like this level. But then, not even 25% into the level, and it's already taken over by Eggman's construction. And the level is nothing but a long level of climbing to the highest height of the construction site. It is the longest and most boring level of the game, and can take 6 to 7 minutes to complete, while most levels in this game can be beaten within a minute and 30 seconds to 2 minutes. So aside from the opening of this level, the only slightly interesting thing about this level is that it contains the orange rocket wisp that blasts us into the air. Too bad it's wasted on such a bland and boring level. Just nothing but hopping across slow minecarts, activating switches, dodging missiles, and blasting upward on a rocket. It's the most repetitive and boring level in the game. So this is a case where both versions of the level are terrible, and they're even worse than the game they came from. So if Modern Sonic's level was nothing but the nature side of Planet Wisp, I probably would have really enjoyed this level. I actually did enjoy the beginning of this level, but that small fraction just doesn't make up for the boring, towering level this is. So the levels are scattered across a bland white side-scrolling hub world, one of the laziest hubs I've ever seen in a game. Shadow Generations hub world was a huge improvement over this, being an actual 3D exploration. It kind of makes me wish that this Sonic Generations was actually a remake and they bothered adding an actual 3D hub world. I've even seen people mod the original PC version of this game. Like there was the one where they tried recreating Sonic 06 and they actually managed to turn the hub world into a 3D hub world based on Soliana from Sonic 06. That was really cool. So I kind of wish they could have done the same for this re-release. So each level entrance has an upper floor where the missions can be found. So upon rescue, each of Sonic's friends will appear by the entrance, and talking to them can give you about 2 hints on finding some of the 5 red star rings hidden in each level. Now, like the missions, there are too many red rings in this game. There's 90 altogether, 45 for each of the Sonics. Collecting 1 red star ring collects a piece of concept art or a music track, while finding all 5 in the world can unlock a new skill to purchase at the shop. I think one of the last skills you can unlock in this game is the homing attack for Classic Sonic. Upon completing 3 levels within each chapter as both Sonics, a boss portal appears, but it requires 3 keys to open, causing mission doors to open up, and they require you to beat 2 missions from each world to collect a key for the boss portal. Just like the red star rings, there's a total of 90 missions, 45 for each of the Sonics. So 5 missions for each Sonic in each world, 10 missions for each world. So while it's nice that the game only requires us to complete 18 missions at minimum to progress through the game, I still think there are way too many missions in this game, with many of them being boring or frustrating. Some of them are very annoying as well. Completing certain missions can unlock skills that can be purchased with in-game points that you collect at the end of each level based on your score, time, and how many rings you've collected. The main reason this game is so lengthy isn't because of the main levels or cutscenes, but because of the dang missions. I would have rather had only 1 or 2 missions per Sonic in each level, while having some of the others as optional challenges that don't really have a reward. For instance, some missions require you to race the ghost of Sonic. Instead of a mission, they easily could have just made this a separate time trial mode. These skills can range from getting the fire, bubble, and magnet shields from Sonic 3 and Knuckles, which only classic Sonic can use, or an infinite boost for modern Sonic. However, you can only hold up to 5 skills at once, and they take a number of skill points to equip. For instance, Sonic's maximum boost requires 100 skill points, and since the maximum amount of skill points is 100, that means you can't equip any other skill with the max boost activated. And the same applies for Super Sonic, which you unlock after beating the game. I honestly hate limitations like that in games. I love it when players can have the option to get creative with their equips. Now, I can understand why you can't equip every ability at once, since they could risk a game breaking or crashing. But I still hate it when everything is limited, instead of just only having a few of them being limited. Upon completing a mission, a bell appears above each mission portal, and jumping at it causes a music note to appear. You grab it, and you can unlock either concept art or music from past games. There's an extras room at the very left of the hub world. It's a fun addition with great concept art, and it also allows us to view cutscenes from the game. But it unfortunately excludes the cutscenes of Sonic saving his friends, and that honestly bugs me since there are 2 variants of these cutscenes depending on which character you were playing as. It would have been more fun to allow players to watch both variants in the theater mode without having to look it up on YouTube instead. The music tracks were some of my favorite unlockables, for instead of just having them appear in a music mode, they give us the option to use these music tracks to listen to within the levels we replay. For instance, if you're not a fan of the music from Green Hill Zone, well, pop in your favorite tune or song from another Sonic game. If you want Sonic to play through Green Hill Zone with the tune of Open Your Heart, go ahead. It's fun to experiment and see if a different track either goes well with a level or just totally doesn't fit in. Some of the results you can get are really neat, like playing Reach for the Stars in Planet Wisp, or New Venture in Seaside Hill. This option even works for boss fights, which can make some of these boss fights more entertaining or epic, depending on which track you used. For instance, I had I Am All of Me from Shadow the Hedgehog playing during the final battle, and it just made the fight more epic, despite still being the worst final battle out of any Sonic game. The only downside to the music is that a lot of the vocal tracks are shortened loops of the first verses of the songs, which can make listening to songs like Sonic Boom, Open Your Heart, or Live and Learn and others feel very repetitive and underwhelming, especially if you already know how the full song goes. I would have rather the full tracks be played. I don't care if it didn't even loop. I'd rather it just keep repeating the full song than loop just a quarter or half of a song. I always loved it when games let us play music from other games or levels within the levels. There might be some music tracks that can get on someone's nerves, so it's nice to give us the option to pick another song that we actually enjoy listening to. The first game I ever played to introduce me to this concept was Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and they also have this feature in Mario and Sonic at the London 2012 Olympic Games, and I just always loved that feature. It was always fun to collect the music tracks, and it was so rewarding, especially if it was a track you really loved. Sometimes it makes you go like, oh, I love this track from this game, I hope it actually appears, and then when you see it appear, it just makes you cheer for joy, you know? Most of the missions are very bland or flat out just cut-ups of levels, but with alterations to make them trickier, like spamming more enemies and pesky obstacles. The challenges can range from reaching the end of a level with a certain number of rings, completing a level that requires using a power-up to progress, like the shields or whiffs, but most of these are just about reaching the finishing line. These missions are all based on the typical ranking system that's been in nearly every Sonic game since Sonic Adventure 2. I don't think you get any reward for S-ranking all the missions, aside from an achievement or a trophy. Each of Sonic's missions also involve 2 with their friends, one where they have to work alongside them, and one where they have to compete against them for no reason. I honestly preferred the events where we worked with the allies, though some are better than others, but it just leaves me wishing we could have played as them instead. The fight missions against Sonic's friends feel absolutely pointless, and they make no sense to the game's story. Sonic just rescued his friends from a timeless void, and he needs to race to the Time Eater to stop this and restore the timeline. Yet his friends think they need to halt him by challenging him to a race, or a game of tag, or even trying to kill him for no reason. What is going on here? Classic Sonic has a mission in Chemical Plant Zone where he teams up with Classic Tails, where Tails can be summoned with the triangle button to fly Sonic through the level while needing to dodge enemies. It's simply a tribute to flying as Tails in Sonic 3. One of the more tolerable missions, Modern Sonic gets a side-scrolling race against Modern Tails through Green Hill Zone as Tails flies the tornado around. Classic Sonic got the better Tails mission in this round. Classic Sonic has a race against Amy in Sky Sanctuary, where for some reason she flies around by spinning her hammer, and you have to run on the spinning floating disc to keep ahead of her. It's kind of tricky, but it's easier when you realize that the spin dash can be used for a boost. Modern Sonic has a level in Chemical Plant where pressing the triangle button summons Amy as she swings her hammer on Sonic so she can give him an aerial boost. It wouldn't be too bad if it weren't for the pesky gauge requirement. Upon pressing the triangle button, a gauge appears, and you have to press the triangle button again at the right time for the swing to work. It's not that the gauge is hard to use, it's a very easy gauge, but it just slows everything down this level. It gets annoying during the last bit where you have to not only have to time the gauge right, but you have to make sure that it also matches with a moving platform that contains the goal ring. This level would have been so much better if just pressing the triangle button launched Sonic, so Classic Sonic wins this round again. Classic Sonic has a race against Knuckles in Green Hill as Knuckles digs through the race. For some reason, we get giant motobugs and buzz bombers that we need to jump off of for a boost to stay ahead of Knuckles. Honestly, the giant badniks aren't a bad idea, but they really feel shoehorned in this out-of-place race with Knuckles. Modern Sonic is a tribute to Knuckles' treasure hunting stages from the adventure games. It's a 3D stage in Sky Sanctuary. So here we follow these yellow arrows until we hear a rapid beeping. We press triangle to summon Knuckles to dig up gold coins. We need to collect 35 gold coins and reach the goal ring. I preferred Modern Sonic's version of this Knuckles mission. Classic Sonic gets an annoying race against Cream the Rabbit in Speed Highway. Seriously, her AI is overpowered and Cream never shuts up as she constantly shouts, "I found one!" over and over, and it gets really annoying. In this challenge, not only do we have to race Cream to the finish, but we have to do it while collecting 11 Chow before Cream. And it doesn't help that when Cream collects a Chow ahead of you, that means it's impossible for you to get any more. So you gotta make sure that you stay ahead of her, otherwise you lost. She flies ahead of us way too fast. This challenge might have worked better as a 3D challenge with branching paths, but as a linear side-scroller, it's annoying as hell. One of the worst character missions in the game. It's definitely Classic Sonic's worst character mission. Modern Sonic's is actually really easy. It's nearly pointless. We go through a majority of City Escape with only one ring, as Cream follows us with 5 Chow, each holding a ring. If Sonic loses a ring, we can just press the triangle button for one of Cream's Chow to give us a ring. I only lost one ring during this mission, and only summoned Cream once. So both missions, they're not good, but Modern Sonic's at least didn't make me want to tear my hair out. Classic Sonic has a challenge where you have to race to the finish. For no reason, Rouge flies around and tries bombing us. This isn't even a race. We just run and dodge obstacles as Rouge tries killing us for no reason. Modern Sonic's Rouge mission isn't great, but it's at least kind of funny. So in Seaside Hill, we need to destroy the egg ponds to advance, but they have shields that bounce Sonic off if he tries jumping on them. So we need to summon Rouge with the triangle button as she shoots projectile hearts. The egg ponds get infatuated by Rouge's looks, and if the hearts hit them, it gives Sonic an opening to defeat them. I'm honestly surprised they kept this into the game, because with how much they try censoring characters in Sonic games nowadays, due to being, politically incorrect apparently, it's funny how they actually still kept this one in. You just don't see that in shows or cartoons or video games anymore where a character distracts people by their looks. So Modern Sonic wins for the Better Rouge challenge. Classic Sonic has to team up with SBO in Seaside Hill, as Sonic needs to summon SBO to use a bladed rope to swing across specific spots. Modern Sonic gets a pesky mission in Speed Highway, where he goes invisible and throws shurikens at us. We need to dodge his attacks and do homing attacks on spotlights to expose him, only to do another homing attack on him multiple times. It's a very tiring and repetitive mission, so Classic Sonic wins this round. Classic Sonic has a pesky race against Blaze, where she flies around with her fire powers, daring us to catch her, and we have to use the Spike Wisp to wall crawl around a huge maze to catch up with Blaze and attack her. Modern Sonic has them running through Crisis City, but there are areas that are walled off by flames. We have to summon Blaze to absorb the flames so we can progress. Both missions honestly suck, which is a shame because Blaze is such a cool character, but Modern Sonic's is less annoying. Classic Sonic has Vector throwing Sonic across the level to progress further. It plays similar to Yoshi's egg throwing from Yoshi's Island. So it's basically like Amy's team-up mission, but with more range, and it's less annoying. Modern Sonic's challenge against Vector is a very infamous one that most players dread. It's a game of tennis where Vector shoots out a music note, and we have to keep volleying it back with a homing shot. It has 3 phases, and we need to keep doing it until Vector gives up, and if we miss it once, we gotta start all over. The mission can take up to 1.5 minutes. The first phase has a blue note, which is slow. The yellow one is faster and has a trick moment where he shoots it high into the sky, requiring us to quickly jump on 2 platforms to reach it. So it might throw some first-time players off guard. The third and final phase has it turn red, and it's at its fastest and hardest to keep up with. The mission wouldn't be so bad if the homing lock-on was more responsive, and if we didn't have to watch the opening cutscene of Vector every time we have to restart. I've had times where the reticle for the homing just did not appear, and so it made me miss some that I was so close by. It just really annoys me. It took me 4 tries to get this one done, so Classic Sonic wins this round again. Classic Sonic has another race to the finish level, but Charmy, for no reason, is trying to kill us as he keeps activating all these traps, water fountains, and spiked barrels at us. Seriously, what is your problem, Charmy? That is no way to repay the guy who saved your life. This is very out of character for Charmy. Modern Sonic does a race through the top of Planet Wisp, but he needs Charmy to summon gusts of wind to create platforms for Sonic to hop across, so Modern Sonic wins this round. Other pesky missions involve those pesky pot robots from Sonic Colors that shoot out rings and bombs. We need to finish levels by collecting 100 rings, but it's hard to know when that robot might shoot out bombs, and they come out way too fast, and the rings disappear quickly if you stay too far away from the robot, so this mission basically takes dumb luck to win. There's a pesky mission involving jumping at a spinning goal sign to keep it airborne, and you have to keep volleying it until it reaches the end goal. It's repetitive, boring, and has a lot of cheap obstacles and platforms that get in your way. Most of these missions are forgettable, boring, and annoying, but I did enjoy some of them, especially the ones that altered the gameplay, like having us go through Rooftop Run on the snowboard from City Escape. That was actually a fun challenge. I also enjoyed the mission that required the elemental shields to progress. I wish more of these missions involved these kind of alterations and gimmicks instead of annoying restrictions. And it's worth mentioning that none of your equipable skills can be used in these missions, so if you think like there's one that could help make this mission easier, tough luck. And to wrap up the gameplay, we have the 7 boss fights in the game, with 6 of them containing a Chaos Emerald that are needed to unlock the final level, or the final battle. So each chapter has 2 boss fights along with a final boss at the end. So each chapter contains the main boss fight that is needed to progress to the next chapter, while there are other bosses that are hidden around the mission sections of each level, and these are the rival battles. Now, they aren't needed to progress to the next chapter, but they will be needed to reach the final battle, because they contain a Chaos Emerald, and you need all 7 to enter the final level. So the first rival battle is Classic Sonic versus Classic Metal Sonic, recreating their race from Sonic CD. I honestly prefer the boss fight in Generations over the original. For in Sonic CD, it wasn't a boss fight, it was just a race where you had to dodge Metal Sonic. So in this version, you actually can attack Metal Sonic by jumping at him. so it's a more visual spectacle in Sonic Generations. The first main boss fight is against the Death Egg robot from Sonic 2. Considering how the Death Egg robot is the hardest boss out of any Sonic game, giving players no rings, having a very small hitbox, and being forced to fight Mecha Sonic before the encounter each time, the boss fight is surprisingly a lot easier in Generations. Though it might take first-time players a bit of time to figure out. We have to dodge his stretchy punch attack, and we have to rush behind him as he tries jumping on us, and then we have to jump at his backside to hurt him. Eventually, the fight goes to a second phase where we need to press a switch to summon the spiked mines, and we need to lure Eggman to target it and punch it, stunning Eggman in the process. And then we have to run up his arm and jump to attack Eggman's cockpit. Admittedly, the jumping part can be tricky, because there were times where I didn't get enough height, causing Sonic to keep bouncing off of the hand, which caused Eggman to recover, forcing me to have to start the cycle all over again. It is tedious, but it's a short boss fight, and I do prefer it over the original. Surprisingly, Metal Sonic and the Death Egg Robot are the only boss fights that Classic Sonic has to fight solo, where the rest of them are modern Sonic boss fights. So the second rival boss fight is against Shadow, recreating their fight on the Space Colony Arc from Sonic Adventure 2. Generations did this fight a lot better. The one in Sonic Adventure 2 took dumb luck to win, as Shadow kept deflecting or avoiding your spin dash and homing attacks, along with his repetitive warping and phrases, along with him spamming Chaos Spear and not letting Sonic have his own power-up to attack Shadow against. It was a very cheap and annoying boss fight. So in Generations, it's less of a fight and more of a race. We have to chase a strange purple ball of light, and we have to boost to stay ahead of Shadow, but Shadow keeps a pretty even pace with us, so it is kind of hard to outrun him, but whoever reaches the purple light first gains a power that lets us blast through the air, and we have to tail down Shadow and keep ramming into him until he gets knocked out. However, Shadow can also reach the ball of light, and if he does, he gets the power and we have to dodge his attacks. So the Generations version of this fight is shorter, easier, and more fun to watch. The second main boss fight is my favorite boss fight in the entire game. It's a recreation of the final fight against Perfect Chaos from Sonic Adventure. I have a huge soft spot for that game. It's my favorite Sonic game of all time, and Perfect Chaos was always my favorite villain from the Sonic series. It admittedly doesn't make sense how Sonic is able to defeat Perfect Chaos without the Chaos Emeralds, since that was a requirement in the original game. It doesn't take away from how much fun this boss fight is, though. First of all, it's more visually stunning than Sonic Adventure's horribly outdated graphics. Not only does Perfect Chaos look more menacing, but his violent thrashing watery tentacles as they smash through buildings and roadways, it really makes this fight more exciting, and they even have Open Your Heart playing in the background, a remix version of it. So this is less of a boss fight and more of an obstacle platforming challenge, as we have to dodge his tentacles and hop across the broken roads and buildings and boost across the water to spiral up Chaos's brain and attack him. We don't have to deal with the pesky cyclones that he had to push us away in the original game. So just like every other boss fight in this game, this is one that surpasses the original. I just wish it gave us the option to refight him as Super Sonic after beating the game. But yeah, best boss fight in the game. One of the highlights of this game as well. The third rival boss fight is the worst in the game, and it's probably the only boss fight in this game that's worse than the original game's boss fight. I know that's going to sound shocking, but I actually prefer this boss fight in Sonic 06. Yes, it is broken as hell, because he can repeatedly grab Sonic and throw him in an endless loop. But once you know what to do, the boss fight is very short and easy. You just gotta stay away from him and wait for him to shout, "How about this?" And then you have to rush at him, do a homing attack, and run like hell, and do the whole thing over again. In Generations, it's a lengthy auto runner as Silver floats in the background, shooting psychic blasts at us, and he lifts up cars that we need to do homing attacks on to reach Silver and attack him. Eventually, he piles a bunch of cars together and tries ramming them at us, and we have to jump on top of them and boost until we can get close enough to do a homing attack on him. As a last resort, Silver summons a bunch of junk and forms it into a huge ball to try ramming us over, and he also tries crushing us with a semi at the same time. I honestly don't know how exactly you're supposed to finish him off during this part, since the homing reticle doesn't show up at this point. I just did a mid-air boost at him, and he tried crushing me with the semi, and he somehow got defeated. It's really hard to pull that off, though, because a lot of the times the semi is like centered right in front of him, and you don't want to stand under that semi or he'll crush you with it. And so it is really hard to find an opening to where you can boost right into him midair. And there's not a very long opening where you can attack him either. So overall, it's the worst rival fight in the game, and it just doesn't make any sense. Why is Silver attacking Sonic in this game for no reason? I thought they were all past this. And they even acknowledged before the boss fight that this is indeed the Silver that Sonic is friends with. It's not the past version of Silver who still thinks Sonic is the Iblis Trigger. Then there's Eggman and the Egg Dragoon from Sonic Unleashed. Now originally this was a boss fight with the Werehog, but it was reimagined as an auto-running boss fight with modern Sonic. We have to grind and boost on a rail to catch up with Eggman and attack his cockpit, while dodging his ice and laser blasts. Eventually, he surrounds us with the arms of his robot, and he tries shocking us with these electric attacks. And we need to wall jump it while dodging the attacks until we reach his cockpit and attack him. The one thing I hate about this boss fight is the requirement to beating him or finishing him off. After attacking him a number of times, it triggers an event where you're skydiving. We have to dodge Eggman's attacks and boost until we can get close enough to ram Eggman's cockpit with a homing attack. Now, the steering during the skydiving is incredibly stiff, and it makes it very tricky to keep a fast pace while dodging these projectiles. Despite its length and repetition, it's still better than the boss fight from Sonic Unleashed. Altogether, I found all of the boss fights in Generations better than the original except for Silver. Now, finally, there's the Time Eater boss fight, and it's honestly the worst final boss I've ever seen in a Sonic game. It's just the worst fight in the game as well. It drags on forever, the characters never shut up in the background, the controls are awful, and it takes dumb luck to win. You fly around as the two Supersonics as Time Eater flies around shooting homing missiles at us. They're pretty easy to dodge, but it's nearly impossible to see and collect the rings that we need to stay in our super form. And if we lose our super form, we die and we have to start the whole lengthy boss fight all over again. The controls are slow and stiff, making it impossible to reach the rings in time. Occasionally the bot switches dimensions, forcing us to press triangle to swap to a side-scrolling perspective. The fight honestly would have been better if it was entirely in 2D, since it's easier to see and collect the rings during this, but these sections never last long enough. I think that's the only reason they were in this game. They're just short periods to let us replenish on rings. We have to keep boosting until we reach the Time Eater, and we have to boost into the gem in the center of its chest. It takes forever to get to him, and it's very easy to lose all of your rings. And then he also gets this pesky move where he freezes time for no reason, and there's no way to fast forward through it. It's not like in Sonic Heroes where you could keep button mashing or moving the control stick to speed it up. It doesn't give you that option here. And finally, he shoots a giant flaming meteor at us as we have to hold the L1 and R1 buttons to spin into the fireball and blast through to finish off the final boss. Such a disappointing way to wrap up what is otherwise a decent anniversary game. And that was the original Sonic Generations in general. It was a fun idea with some great levels and boss fights, but a lot of padding that stretches the game on way too long, along with some awful levels and missions. So how does the 2024 version compare to the original? Honestly, there's not a lot of changes. I mean, they got the drop dash and you got the Chow hiding in the background, but gameplay-wise, none of the graphics were remade or improved upon. You can't call it an HD remaster since the original game was HD to begin with. If anything, it loads a lot faster on the PS5, but the original game didn't take long to load to begin with. I didn't notice any improvements on the frame rate either. It felt just about the same as I remember. So, like I said, collecting the 3 hidden Chow, it does absolutely nothing. It would have been nice if collecting these could have collected more exclusive artwork, music tracks, or alternate skins for the Sonics, or, it just felt like wasted opportunity. All it gives you is either an achievement or a trophy. The biggest change to the game is the altering of the cutscenes and dialogue. They redubbed over most of the cutscenes in this game, with barely any of the original voice clips left behind. Story-wise, the writing is an improvement, showing a lot more respect for Sonic's history, like having Sonic and Tails knowing what Green Hill Zone is, unlike the original game where they act like they don't know the place despite being in many past Sonic games. I like a lot of the changes, but where these changes really suffer are with the character interactions as Sonic saves his friends. It cuts out a lot of the humorous moments, heavily altering the dialogue without reanimating Sonic's reactions to fit the context. Some of these changes I don't mind, like how at the beginning Sonic was originally pushing Amy back by grabbing her face. That felt very rude and out of character for Sonic to do. Even during the period in the early Sonic days where Sonic kind of treated Amy harshly because he was hiding his feelings for her. But yeah, this still felt kind of out of character for him. I heard even Sega of Japan absolutely hated this scene. So in this re-release, they altered the scene to where Amy is now just standing in the background holding cupcakes, and Sonic is no longer, pushing her back. So it's a cute replacement to the mean-spirited original scene. They also added a bunch of Chow in the background from the party, where in the original, Cheese was the only Chow at the party. The character interaction rewrites are where the rewriting hurts the most. The interactions between Sonic and Tails are actually an improvement, but everyone else, it was overall awful. Unlike the original game where Sonic had silent responses to his friends being rescued, they actually gave Sonic mouth movement and actually gave him dialogue to respond to these characters. But they didn't bother reanimating his expressions or body language, and it just makes a lot of these scenes feel off and out of context. There's one example that was almost an improvement, but because they didn't fix Sonic's animations or give him a better response, it feels very out of character. So originally during the cutscene where modern Sonic rescued Amy, she had a really cringy moment where she said she was afraid she wouldn't be able to flirt with him again, causing Sonic to facepalm and shake his head. It was just an awful moment for both characters. It gave Amy a very weird line of dialogue, and it made Sonic look like he hates her and wishes he didn't save her to begin with. So in the 2024 version, they rewrote Amy to have better dialogue. But they didn't change Sonic's animation and gave him a response that still sounds pretty rude to Amy for no reason. So Amy now thanks Sonic for the save, and she says she'll have to repay him sometime, causing Sonic to facepalm and say, "Not now, Amy." This felt kind of harsh coming from Sonic. Amy now has something more respectable to say, yet Sonic still treats her like trash, yet has more positive interactions with every other character he saves in the game. Why did they treat Amy so harshly in this? She hasn't been treated this badly in every game since Sonic Lost World, since she got better character development since then. I just don't get it. He even gives Rouge a compliment, and she's a character who's constantly backstabbed Sonic and his friends. They also ruined the joke with Amy being rescued by Classic Sonic, where she expresses how he looks younger every day and she asks him what his secret is. Now she just says that she found him cute before, but now she finds him cuter. Knuckles no longer has the funny moment where he asks Classic Sonic if he gained weight, causing Classic Sonic to look down in disappointment, rub his belly, and sigh, and that was such a funny moment. So that response makes no sense to Knuckles' question, and it leaves Maine to wonder why they changed this dialogue to begin with. In the new one, he just asks Sonic if he knows what happened to Angel Island, and so Classic Sonic still, rubs his belly in disappointment. It's like, what? They really should have reanimated that if they insisted on changing the dialogue. And also, Knuckles' current voice actor is awful, and it makes the character sound even more dim-witted than he was in Sonic Boom. And while they still kept in Eggman's maniacal laugh and cough during the final battle cutscene, they cut out the funny line of classic Eggman saying, "Wow, will I really get that crazy?" For no reason, they also changed the dialogue during the part where all of Sonic's friends are cheering for him at the end. Despite the different lines of dialogue, it doesn't change the context of the scene at all. Cream was the only one to not say anything different than before. And finally, they cut out the funny scene from the ending where Amy facepalms Knuckles into a tree. She still facepalms him, but he just stumbles back not very far, and he just gives an embarrassed smile. I missed how absurd and hilarious that scene originally was. The way Amy just barely tapped him with her palm and how he just easily tumbles away and slams right into a tree. That was downright hilarious. I wish they only just changed Sonic and Tails' dialogue, yet kept everyone else's intact. It's one thing to redo the voice lines for characters that have different voice actors now, like Tails, but it makes no sense to have Roger Craig Smith, Cindy Robinson, or Mike Pollock have to redo their lines. It's weird how some of the voice lines were kept in from the original, while others were redone entirely, even if it was the exact same dialogue as before. Some of the voices are a lot worse than they were before, including Knuckles and Silver. I can't stand their current voices. Admittedly, some of the new voices were an improvement, though, including classic and modern Tails' voice. Also, it's nice that they fixed Espio's audio, because in the original, he talked so quiet, I couldn't understand a word he said, but in this game, I could hear him clearly. So, that's one of the fixes they did. Overall, Sonic Generations is still a decent game, but it does suffer from some technical issues. There were times in Classic Sonic's version of Crisis City, for example, where Sonic is supposed to run on a speed booster to run up a wall to the next area, yet instead it launched him off-screen to his death. I don't recall this issue ever happening in the original, yet it happened to me twice during the mission where I have to race the doppelganger Sonic. It's not perfect, but it's still the most playable out of all the Boost Sonic games. It has the best controls and physics out of any Sonic game between 2006 and 2024. It's jarring coming back from the sluggish controls from Forces, Lost World Frontiers, and even the recently released Shadow Generations. It's shocking to see how much looser the controls and jumps feel in Generations. They feel easier to control. I also love how it doesn't have the floaty and wonky double jump that was introduced in Sonic Colors and Lost World. I prefer Sonic just having a single jump. So if you already have the original Sonic Generations on PC or Xbox 360 or PS3, I don't see any point in having to rebuy this re-release. It might be frustrating for those who are just fine with the original and don't want to see the cutscenes heavily altered for no reason. Sonic X Shadow Generations is more worth getting for just Shadow Generations alone. Otherwise, this game is a great introduction to young gamers who recently became Sonic fans, never played a bunch of the past games, and never got a chance to grow up with Sonic Generations. Also, if you're a Nintendo gamer who had to miss out on this game due to never being released for Wii or Wii U, then it might be worth getting for Switch, but I have a bad feeling that Shadow Generations will perform horribly on the Switch. I was just playing that game and I was like, oh god, I can imagine this chugs and lags terribly on the Switch. I give Sonic Generations an 8 out of 10. I give Shadow Generations a 7 out of 10. But as a bundled package, I give Sonic X Shadow Generations a 9 out of 10. That's all I have to show for now. Thank you for watching. See you next time and have a great day.